I'm Elise Loyens, Medical Coordinator for Doctors Without Borders. We are shocked, appalled, and angry about the shipwreck that happened on Tuesday night. There are still around 600 people missing or dead, and this is a direct consequence of the violent EU migration policies. We are now in Malakasa camp here in Greece, where around 70 survivors have been transferred since Friday night. We are present with a team of medical doctors and psychologists to support the survivors. People are disclosing to us stories that are horrifying, not only about the boat passage, but also to what happened to them before. In Libya, we hear stories about torture, about violence, and unfortunately, this is not new to us. We have been asking since years for a safe passage for these people, so yet again, we would like to request urgently from the EU member states to do a shared search and rescue activity.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Thank you for joining me here with Conversations with Tez for Wild Wednesday. Our favorite neighborhood ginger has the night off, but we have a lot to get into. I know you all look forward to the midweek break, but a lot has happened. Let's start with Texas recommending charges against DeSantis. Yes, you heard that correctly.
Yeah, Clark. It's the gift that keeps on giving all year. That's what I feel like the news day is today. So, in a stunning piece of Florida man nonsense, Ron DeSantis has been recommended for charges in Texas. Oh, yes, my friends. The Miami Herald is reporting that the Texas sheriff has recommended criminal charges in Ron DeSantis's migrant flights to Martha's Vineyard. According to a statement provided to the Miami Herald by the Bexar County Sheriff's Department, they completed their criminal investigation into the on-the-ground operation that allegedly lured the migrants to the flights with false promises of jobs and other opportunities on the other end of the flight. The case filed includes both felony and misdemeanor charges of unlawful restraint. At this time, the case is being reviewed by the DA's office. Once an update is available, it will be made public. So now the case has been handed off to a district attorney in a county that includes San Antonio. Now, I don't know if anything will ever come of this or if Ron DeSantis will be held accountable for this operation that was essentially human trafficking. But it sure is fucking fun to watch, especially considering he just launched his shitty presidential campaign that is going horribly. Case in point, because this little tidbit dropped into the interwebs today. Governor, I think there's a World War II veteran back there, an aide told DeSantis as a crowd swarmed around him. DeSantis gave a nod in the veteran's direction and gave him a thumbs up, thanked him for his service, turned his back, and went on to taking photographs with other people. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds came up to Ron DeSantis and said the veteran would like a signature and nudged along the piece of paper. The paper said on it, "Reserved VIP." DeSantis scribbled his name on that piece of paper and then walked off looking for the next voter to talk to. Governor, did you want to know there's a World War II veteran? Another person asked 30 seconds later as DeSantis smiled for as many photos as he could. Yeah, I know. I signed something for him. And then Ron DeSantis gave another thumbs up and went on his way. That on top of this piece of breaking news that came out of the Intellectualist today. In Florida, a Republican prosecutor declined to pursue 6 voter fraud cases in red-leaning counties in the state. Villages. Instead, they targeted people of color. That's Ron DeSantis for you, folks.
He has zero desire to actually represent the people because, as I've told you all before, he has admitted he does not pay attention to polling. He doesn't pay attention to any of that. He doesn't have the personality to talk to people. He does not care about talking to people. And this is why I say stop blanketly giving respect to someone because they formerly served in the military. There's a lot of people, just like Ron DeSantis, that don't care about those that came before him. He just wants power. He wants to show Trump that the student can overshadow and take over the teacher. But the world of DeSantis is not that simple. It's always a whole lot of delulu. Get comfy for this one.
I'm not sure I've ever heard anything quite like this.
In terms of, throughout history,
Yeah.
I mean, I think could I have been there with Jesus's disciples? I mean, these are people who, Peter's just fishing one day and all of a sudden, this guy comes up to him, catches all the fish and says, you're going to be fisher. I want you to be a fisher of men. Come with me. And so these guys all went out and they dedicated their life to spreading the gospel. And they all were killed for, they tried to kill John. John ended up, being able to survive. But I mean, the intent was to put him to death too. And, to talk about what that was like, talk about what their impressions are, what of that. I look back at that and would love to have been able to be there with them.
Yeah, Ron DeSantis, right up there among Jesus' disciples, sending migrants off to different cities where news outlets have camera crews ready under the pretense of lies about housing and employment, all for a 5-minute cable hit on Fox, just like Jesus would have done. And look, I'll be the first to admit that I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to religion, but I'm pretty sure that I can safely say that nothing about what Ron DeSantis or any of these Republican politicians are doing while pandering to the base in any way on any planet comports with the teachings of Christianity. We're talking about a party that has moved relentlessly and shamelessly to cut earned benefits and food stamps, all of which are employed overwhelmingly by the elderly, the poor, and the disabled. They've moved to prevent refugees from resettling in their states. They've moved to prevent workers from earning a living wage in deference to ultra-wealthy CEOs. I mean, you quite literally could not have a party more openly antithetical to the values of the Bible if you tried. And yet, I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise then that that party is led by this guy.
Okay. You mentioned the Bible. You've been talking about how it's your favorite book. And you said, I think last night in Iowa, some people are surprised that you say that. I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are,
well,
and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. When I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that
you
like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
Bullshit aside, if you think that guy is in any way, shape, or form an adherent to Christianity, then I've got a bridge to sell you. And let's be clear, that scam artistry is finally becoming apparent enough that Democrats are pushing back. Here's both Texas state legislator James Tallarico and Pete Buttigieg assailing Republicans for using Christianity as a shield for policies that in no way actually comport with the stated values of that religion.
We are here debating a bill that will loosen gun regulations. We're the only country in the world that allows this to happen. Globally, we are not an outlier in mental health. We're not an outlier in school security. We're an outlier in the number of readily accessible weapons of war in our community. You can't offer thoughts and prayers on Monday and then debate a bill to loosen gun regulations on Tuesday. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe prayer can change lives. I believe prayer can change the world. But there is something profoundly cynical about asking God to solve a problem that we're not willing to solve ourselves. God moves, God works through us. God has no other hands but our hands. We prayed, and God sent moms from all over the state, from both political parties, to advocate for gun safety. We prayed, and God sent families from Uvalde to travel 160 miles to advocate for gun safety. We prayed, and God sent our colleague from Uvalde to bring a bill that would prevent tragedies from happening in the future. But instead of hearing that bill, we're hearing this bill. We have ignored God's messengers. This is moral madness. And this is not the Texas House I know. Yesterday, members of this body from both political parties summoned the courage to address this problem. That's the Texas House I know, not this bill. I know many of you are worried about your conservative scorecards, but the only scorecard that matters is God's, and all of us are failing.
The Republican Party likes to cloak itself in the language of religion. Now, our party doesn't talk about that as much, largely for a very good reason, which was we are committed to the separation of church and state, and we stand for people of any religion and people of no religion. But we should call out hypocrisy when we see it. And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
And that's the thing. If you as a lawmaker oppose common sense laws that a vast majority of Americans support because you are owned by the gun lobby, you have forfeited your right to invoke your so-called religious beliefs in your speeches and tweets. If you vote to cut veterans' health care and education and Meals on Wheels for seniors, you are doing exactly the opposite of what your faith preaches. I mean, why are we pretending that we don't know what Jesus himself stood for? He was an immigrant who said to help the poor, welcome strangers, and called hypocrites wolves in sheep's clothing. It's like if Republicans looked at the Bible when drafting their party platform and decided that every single one of their positions would be the polar opposite of what that book said. And it's not just the Republican Party itself. Now a number of churches have decided that instead of promoting their religion's actual values, they'd rather be an arm of the MAGA cult.
I'm to the place right now, if you vote Democrat, I don't even want you around this church. You can get out. You can get out, you demon. You can get out, you baby butchering election thief. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. I don't care how mad that makes you. You get pissed off as you want to. You cannot be a Christian and vote Democrat in this nation. They are God-denying demons that butcher babies and hate this nation. They hate this nation. Get mad all you want to. I don't care if you stand. I don't care if you throw tomatoes, praise God. I'm about to throw a microphone up in his house. CNN can eat my dirty socks. You cannot be a Democrat and a Christian. You cannot. Somebody say amen. The rest of you, get out. Get out. Get out in the name of Jesus. I ain't playing your stupid games. Bunch of devils. I'm sick of it. Hey, want to talk about the insurrection? Let me tell you something. You ain't seen the insurrection yet. You keep on pushing our buttons, you low-down sorry compromisers. You God-hating communist America. You'll find out what an insurrection is, because we ain't playing your garbage. We ain't playing your mess. My Bible says that the church of the living God is an institution that the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And the Bible says that we'll take it by force. That's what the Bible says. That's what the Bible says. It's gonna get worse.
So yeah, that was a lot of things, But Jesus' teachings isn't one of them. And look, I want to be clear that this is in no way an attack on Christianity, but it is an attack on people who use Christianity as a shield to spread bigotry and intolerance and harm onto people who don't share the same views as they do. One of the core tenets of Christianity is to help others. And so I would urge caution when you've got Republican politicians pretending that its primary purpose is to serve as a vehicle for hate. Or put another way, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing but inwardly are ravenous wolves.
And I'm going to say this, and it might ruffle some feathers, but I don't care. When you make your religion your entire personality trait, you act as if you cannot make a sound decision on your own without consulting a pastor, a priest, etc. It opens you up to a cult mindset. And if you notice, the ones faking it the most and making it okay for other people to fake it are millionaires. Are millionaires that know that these people have been so indoctrinated to follow one figure, predominantly a male figure, that just says, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm a good Christian, regardless of what their actions are, regardless of what actually comes out of their mouth. Because even those swept up in tyrannical Christianity still see themselves as a millionaire whose bank account just doesn't reflect it yet. So they are taught that blessings are material, but also taught that they're not supposed to be of this world. So they believe that that pastor is so blessed and highly favored because he has a private jet that they're paying for. They believe that their lives are going to get so much better if they vote Christian, not realizing they're voting against their better interest and the better interest of those that they claim to be praying for every day and love so much. If you need a book to tell you to be a good person and you still are not a good person, baby, you are doubly fucked up. Doubly fucked up. But we know, as we discussed yesterday, that Hunter Biden took a plea deal. Run-of-the-mill shit. Let's see how some politicians are reacting to it.
Biden gets from his dad, write it off, there'll be no sort of jail sentence or anything. What did Paul Manafort get? 20 years in prison. So I think it bothers people to see two sets of, standards of justice.
The Justice Department is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is acting independently based on the facts that are given to it without any interference from the politicians. He negotiated a deal, which is what any criminal defendant can do.
They've made him a very good deal, and he sucked it up like a Hoover Deluxe. And I can't blame him. If I'd been his lawyer, based on what I know about the case, Justice said, here's the deal, here's the proposal, I'd have said, man, take it before they change their mind.
And yes, I'm fully aware of the conversation that has been taking place all day on Twitter with white people after gaslighting us for decades about the justice system, utilizing Black people in a conversation that we don't need to be in. All of a sudden, they're pointing out all the injustices within the justice system because they hate Trump so much. I mean, because they love Trump so much and they hate the Biden so much. And if you notice, every time they try to have their ultimate gotcha moment, they're admitting to what they gaslight us about. Now, I told you all this before a few episodes ago, that the son of Robert Kennedy has become a crazed anti-vaxxer. He is definitely a dino, Democrat in name only. And I believe he's just tossing his hat in the ring in hopes of doing like a vote split. But that's not going to happen. But take a look at what his original plan was as to kick off his campaign. I don't know how he thought this was going to work, but
Now, I don't know about you. Starting your presidential run based off a lie? Well, that seems really on brand for Republicans. And I mean, if your entire history is a fucking lie and bullshit science. But this? Republican women, do you see how little your men think of you? They're willing to throw you into a closet and close the door.
Now, coming from ground.news, this, wow. And the stories on this come with warnings. Okay, so it's from ground.news and 2fab.com are reporting RFK Jr. plotted fake, excuse me, RFK Jr. plotted fake split from Cheryl Hines amid backlash for controversial anti-vax comments. So instead of just saying, oopsie doodle, I messed up regarding the whole anti-vaxxer stuff, let me pretend to split from my wife, then help Joe Rogan and Elon Musk dox a scientist and try to bully that scientist into debating me, even though I don't have the mental capacity to do such. But let's keep going. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. may be the one running for president, but it's his wife, Curb Your Enthusiasm star Cheryl Hines, who is feeling the heat for some of his more incendiary statements. In her first interview since he announced his candidacy for the Democratic nomination, Hines was asked about his anti-vax stance and whether his beliefs have affected her professionally, while Kennedy himself revealed the lengths to which he was prepared to go to distance his other half from controversy. I support Bobby and I want to be there for him, and I want to feel loved and support. I want him to feel loved and supported by me, she said in a new profile with the New York Times, which comes after she had to call some of his comments reprehensible and insensitive back in January. At the time, her husband made headlines for a speech he made during an anti-vax rally in Washington, D.C. During a rally against vaccine mandates, Kennedy likened the policies enacted to fight the pandemic to Nazi Germany. I keep telling y'all, wealthy does not mean well educated. And even insinuated those facing persecution from Nazis had better options than anti-vaxxers do now. Even in Hitler's Germany, you could cross the Alps into Switzerland. You can hide in the attic like Anne Frank did. Did he forget how things ended? I visited in 1962 East Germany with my father and met people who climbed the wall and escaped. Many died doing it, but it was possible, he said during his speech. And before you say, Taz, isn't it shocking given that his uncle was John F. Kennedy and then his father, and they stood on the right side of history? What do I tell y'all all the time? A lot of these people look at how they will appear legacy-wise in the history books. Doesn't mean that they give a shit. And when their children come up and come of age, you get a good idea of what the hell was said around the dinner table. Speaking with NYT, Kennedy said things got so bad for them at the time, he considered a fake split to lessen the damage towards Hines. I don't know. Better idea would not be a prick, not be stupid. Educate yourself. But I'm sorry. If my partner wants to fake a split, I would make it real. I don't play in fantasies. Now, you may have heard, you may not have heard, but it was confirmed. The Department of Justice did delay their investigation into Trump. Wish they didn't, but let's take a look.
This certainly is no laughing matter. In fact, this is incredibly serious and disappointing. This is from Really American, Unreal, despite the constant barrage of complaints from Republicans that Biden's Justice Department is maliciously targeting Trump for political reasons. A new report details how Attorney General Merrick Garland was actually holding back for political reasons. According to the report published in the Washington Post, AG Garland, FBI Director Wray, and Acting U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Michael Sherwin, were avoiding directly investigating or implicating Trump for what happened on January 6th because they wanted to avoid the appearance of partisanship. As a result, the investigation focused instead, starting by looking at much lower profile subjects. The report estimates that this strategy actually caused at least 1 year in delay in starting the investigation into Trump and co-conspirators. So when Republicans repeatedly barked that the investigation into Trump's actions were motivated by political animus, the exact opposite was the case. If anything, Trump was getting preferential treatment because of who he is. I don't think we need to defund the FBI, but we certainly need to change that leadership because we can't afford that leadership again.
Now, in full disclosure, I admit I originally thought because they were starting from the bottom and moving up, I thought that they were doing it how they prosecute in the drug game. Get the lower ones and get the information to build up the case on the head honcho. But no, now we know why it took so long for them to get the documents back from him. And that's the critical part for me. That is the critical part for me. You knew how important those documents were. You knew the information that was in there. And he had all this time to do whatever he was going to do with them. And as I've covered before, Trump knew those documents. Trump may not know the alphabet, but he knew those documents and what were in them, what was in what box, where, with what, not everything else. And to find out that he had clothes and shoes in the box with him, baby, I would have burnt them. I wouldn't have even, diaper Dawn, But a sycophant is going to be a sycophant. Carrie Lake, yes, you know the chick that ran for governor, lost, sued because she claimed that the election lied for her as well, as if other Republicans weren't elected as well. She has a new plan to help Trump. Once again, please stop believing that money equals intelligence.
Sore loser crybaby Carrie Lake has come out with a brand new plan, not to overturn her election, although she does have a new plan for that. But she has a plan to help Donald Trump survive this indictment. And that plan, of course, is to have literally every other Republican running for president drop out of the race and immediately endorse Donald Trump. And I gotta tell you, this is a plan that I 100% support. I too, along with Carrie Lake, and by the way, Charlie Kirk is even pushing this too. But I will also say I think every Republican should immediately drop out of the 2024 presidential race and endorse Donald Trump. That is what they should all do. Because that might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. You're talking about having all of the people who are not facing up to 400 years in prison. And yeah, that's what Donald Trump is looking at with the charges against him, up to 400 years. So let's take the one guy who could spend several centuries in prison, and he stays. But all these other people that are not facing criminal charges, y'all should get out of the race and endorse the guy that's been indicted in 2 different states. Yeah, that sounds like a super duper smart idea. And I love it. I love that Carrie Lake has come up with this. I mean, how much brain power did she have to expend in order to come up with this brilliant plan that makes absolutely no sense? Like, seriously, I don't get it. And honestly, I'm actually surprised that none of the other Republicans have gone along with it, right? You would think that there would be a couple people running that are going to be like, okay, in solidarity, I'll drop out and I'll endorse him. Trump's already got the nomination, which, by the way, Carrie Lake did point out. Like, he's going to be your nominee, unless, of course, we get a conviction prior to the primaries and caucuses. So, yeah. I mean, that would hurt. But then, Carrie, if that happens, you've already encouraged everybody else to drop out. And if they were to do that, you'd be left with only Donald Trump. And your party could be nominating a man who, by the time the, general election rolls around, he could literally be sitting in prison. You realize that, right? Not that that would technically stop him from being elected or stop him from actually being president. He can be president from behind bars. He can run for president from behind bars, unless he's convicted of treason, which he's not been accused of, so he should be okay, right? And then we'll just have a president of the United States who serves his 4-year term from behind prison bars. That's what Republicans want. That's what Carrie Lake is suggesting. That's what Charlie Kirk is suggesting, because these people are very stupid. They think they're super smart, right? They think they genuinely know how all of this works, and they have these great political masterminds, and they can do all these things. Y'all are great at marketing, I'll give you that. You're so much better than anything the left has to offer. I'll give you that. But when it comes to actually being a smart person with good ideas, y'all might be some of the dumbest people to ever work in politics.
And her idea is, if these trials are delayed, like he can get into office, and she believes that he can just pardon himself of everything. Let's keep in mind, Trump's next court date for Florida, because remember, in Florida, they expedite everything. There's no sitting around twiddly diddly, is August 14th. August 14th. And he has other court dates coming up. And let's not forget the precautions that are already being taken in Atlanta for the end of this month. Pushing forward, okay, everybody drops out. Because the next in line, as we've seen, because charges are being suggested heavily regarding DeSantis. DeSantis already has lawsuits against him. He keeps pulling these stunts with migrants. He's going to have some criminal charges as well. Shoot, at this point, Trump is more like DeSantis light. Now, for everybody questioning Trump's security clearance, let's get into it and break that down.
Normally they do, and they are given the intel briefs, the daily intel briefs. But the current president can cancel that. Trump's access to those briefs has been canceled. So you can call me a fucking liar all you want, but the bottom line is Trump is not authorized to get those briefings anymore. He currently has absolutely no access to anything classified by the government. Period. Or, you know what you could do? You could try and post something that maybe says that you know a little bit more about this than me. Like, here. Here. Who are you again? Well, you want to know something funny? You're going to love this. President Obama had a full-on approved top secret security clearance, standard issue, just like most people have, or at least I should say most people that hold that clearance for more than a year. He got your standard, blessed off on by the security agencies, security clearance. Donald Trump didn't. President Trump did not. President Trump held an interim clearance because he didn't meet the minimum qualifications. Now, he was granted said clearance simply because of the office he held. He had a need to know, and, well, guess what? He was in the job. But his clearance never left the interim phase. Most of them start out interim because, they get elected, they take office. It takes a good year sometimes to complete a top secret clearance, especially when you have foreign contacts. President Trump had a lot of foreign contacts. Obama had some foreign contacts. It's not uncommon for people to have foreign contacts. But Trump could never get clear. Trump could never pass the interim. Now, as a former president and holding a clearance, presidents typically have the right to receive the daily intelligence briefings. I forget how long they've been doing that for, but yeah. President Bush Sr. was receiving his. Clinton was receiving his. I don't even know if Barack Obama even wants his. I don't know. But when Biden came in, he was said, you know what? No. Trump talks too fucking much. And he canceled that shit like a fucking stamp. Because, you know, the president has the authority. He can deny other people who are not currently serving in the office all the rights and privileges, especially when he has just cause. And Trump has demonstrated throughout many years that he can't keep his fucking mouth shut. Look, face it, you guys elected somebody that doesn't give a shit about the security of this nation, doesn't know how to keep a fucking secret, loves to talk to fucking, dictators and authoritarianists. You voted for, and you continue apparently to support, a genuine, un-American threat to national security and a piece of shit. He's a criminal and he's going to jail. State charges in 2 different states, with a third one probably coming, and federal charges. He's gonna die a convicted traitor.
So, those trying to make the argument that, yeah, even though Trump had classified files, he, just like every other president, is getting briefings. It's okay for him to have it. No. Oh, excuse me. And on top of that, Trump 100% does not understand the charges that he's facing, and he doesn't even seem to be wanting to educate himself on it. Don't believe me? Let's take a look.
Since his indictment, Donald Trump has expressed his views of the indictment, of the Department of Justice, of the FBI, of the special counsel, Jack Smith, in no uncertain terms. I would have advised him against doing all that. Of course, it's very difficult to restrain him, which is probably why his 2 principal lawyers in the Mar-a-Lago case resigned the day the indictment came down. And as we speak, even though there were 2 lawyers next to him, 2 very fine lawyers, one from Miami, one from New York, during the arraignment last week in federal court in Miami, neither is the counsel of record in this case. So as we speak, at 1:45 in the afternoon on Tuesday, January 20th, 2023, Donald Trump does not have a legal team in place to defend him in Mar-a-Lago, even though yesterday the judge in this case fixed the trial date as August 24th, 2 months from now. I doubt that that's realistic, but it shows you how serious judges are in South Florida on the right to a speedy trial, where the rule in that part of the country is 70 days between the day of the indictment and the day of the trial. What is August 24th? 70 days after the day the indictment was released. Okay, all of that is background. The former president gave what I think is a disastrous and incoherent interview.
According to the indictment, you were here at Bedminster on July 21st, 2021, after you're no longer president, and you were recorded saying that you had a document detailing a plan of attack on another country that was prepared by the U.S. military for you when you were president, the Iran attack plan. You remember that?
Ready?
You were recorded.
It wasn't a document.
Okay.
I had lots of paper. I had copies of newspaper articles. I had copies of magazines.
I know. This is specifically a quote. You're quoted on the recording saying the document was secret, adding that you could have declassified it while you were president, but, quote, now I can't. You know, this is still secret, highly confidential. And the indictment cites the recording and the testimony from people in the room saying you showed it to people there that day. So you say on this on tape,
it says just the opposite,
that you can't declassify it. So why have it?
When I said that I couldn't declassify it now, that's because I wasn't president. I never made any bones about that. When I'm not president, I can't declassify.
And that's what you said. You didn't declassify it.
I said no. I said I couldn't.
Could have
but that wasn't a
declassified
document, Brett. There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things.
Why do you want to hold on to those documents after you're president?
I don't say I do.
You just didn't know what was in the boxes?
With NARA, giving them back. All of a sudden, we've got raided, which is a violation of my, Fourth Amendment rights. They raided my home, and they came and they took things. We were discussing this with NARA. Look at Obama, look at Clinton. Clinton took documents, Clinton took tapes in his socks.
Interviews with his story.
The Clinton socks case.
I do know it well.
And it basically said the president has every right to keep whatever he wants, and that includes me. I have every right to have those boxes. This is purely a Presidential Records Act. This is not a criminal thing. In fact, the New York Times of all had a story just the other day that the only way NARA could ever get this stuff, this back, would be please, 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 could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
Because they have no. We
They
were
did
talking.
ask for it.
No, and
they said,
I gave
"Can you
them
give the
some,
documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said they went to DOJ to subpoena you to get them
Which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
And
But why not just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to NARA yet.
Oh, sorry to say this, because as many of you know, Donald Trump and I have been friends for nearly 40 years, and we spoke many, many times during his White House years. But he is terribly confused and terribly ill-advised, because I don't know who's advising him, as I just explained to you, to give an interview like this. He comes across as incoherent, as willfully evading the question, and as having a fundamental misunderstanding of the charges against him. The Presidential Records Act allows the former president to keep documents that the former president has created, which is why Bill Clinton was allowed to keep tapes that he made of his own words and his own behavior in the White House. That has nothing to do with NDI. NDI is national defense information, by definition created by the CIA, the State Department, the Department of Defense, some other entity. The president, the former president, have no authority whatsoever to retain those documents. I'm sorry to say to my friend, but he is mistaken when he says those are his documents. And as for its rights being violated, the feds got a search warrant. They followed the Fourth Amendment. They demonstrated under oath that it was more likely than not that evidence of criminal behavior would be found in the place to be searched and the things to be seized. And they've pretty much proven that already. I don't know where any of this is going to go, but the more Donald Trump says, the more it's going to harm him. The feds will capture every word he says and analyze the look on his face and the movement of his hands and the twitches under his eyes, and they'll have experts analyze it. They'll know what he's thinking and when he's lying and when he's telling the truth. They'll know when he's convinced himself of a lie. And they'll be totally prepared to cross-examine him if he ever chooses to take the stand in his case, if there is a trial. Obviously, there wouldn't be a trial if there's some kind of a guilty plea. So where this is going to go, I don't know. But Mr. President, stop giving these interviews. I know you like to be the center of attention. I know you want to persuade your base that you believe you're not guilty. The base already knows that. But every time you give an interview to anyone, whether it's Brett Baer or whether it's the young woman from CNN, you are hurting yourself, hurting your case, and separating yourself from your lawyers.
Yeah, but Trump likes to listen to people who just pat him on the back and tell him what he wants to hear. Sound familiar? That's why he listens to Mr. Fitton, who has a degree in English. But Trump, as we all know, he has, big hopes and dreams and desires to be a dictator. Think I'm joking? This, he's adding to his list of things he wants to do when he's elected.
If there was like one thing that we could point to that we could say this was a pretty benign comment, but it was a sort of solidification of what Trump would do to become a dictator if he were to be elected, and I think we found it.
Presidents until it was wrongfully curtailed by the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Not a very good act. This disaster of a law is clearly unconstitutional, a blatant violation of the separation of powers. When I return to the White House, I will do everything I can to challenge the Impoundment Control Act in court and, if necessary, get Congress to overturn it. We will overturn it.
The reason why this worries me more than anything else is because, like, the Impounding Control Act, like, it just sounds so benign and boring, and, like, people aren't going to know what it is, and most of his supporters aren't going to look it up anyways. Seems like it shouldn't be such a big deal, but it is the biggest of deals. What this act does is it prevents the president from superseding Congress and just enacting their own budget. Some of you might say, well, Congress has control of the purse, so, like, constitutionally, they can't just, you know, override Congress. They'd have to go through a whole process, right? Not really. Before we had the Impounding Control Act, the president could just refuse to fund government agencies. This is what Nixon did. This is why the Impounding Control Act exists to begin with, where Congress would pass an actual budget and then the president would just refuse to fund those services or government agencies because they opposed it. That's what Trump wants to do away with. He wants to be able to say, no, this is where the money goes. That's where the money goes. This is where my money comes from. And then he wraps it in a gray, neutral veneer of the Impounding Control Act, just boring enough to push you to sleep, or assume that it's something about cars. And normally I would say, like, Trump supporters, is this what you really want? But it is. It is what they want. They want a king. They want a god king to rule over them.
Now, just to be clear, the Impounding Control Act of 1974, it established procedures to prevent the president and other government officials from unilaterally substituting their own funding decisions over Congress. It created the House and Senate budget committees and the Congressional Budget Office. It created a process for the president to follow regarding delaying or canceling funding provided via Congress. It was established in response to Nixon denying funding to programs he didn't agree with. Are you starting to catch why Trump is always bringing up Nixon? He wants to take what Nixon did and take it to the next level. And he looks at the fact that Nixon just got as that's what he's going to get. Let's take a pause for the cause, and then we're going to get into OceanGate. How apropos that it's already named OceanGate. Here we go.
I don't dance, I just float, 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 float. I don't dance, I just float, 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 float. I just float. I'm light as a feather, I'm light as a feather, yeah, baby, I float. It's hard to look at my resume and not find a reason to toast. She throwing that thing in a circle, making it viral, I might just elope. Say, look.
Throw it away. What are y'all trying to prove with this ring around this tub? That you know shapes, you know how to make circles, so you're really not gonna mop the garage? I'm saying mop it to clean it. We have guests coming. But you didn't clean it up because I don't smell bleach. I don't smell any chemicals. I'm not lightheaded, I'm not dizzy. That means you didn't use enough chemicals. I smell urine. Bleach everything. Bleach it. Everything on the table.
Had to lighten it up just a little bit. Okay, coming from the Insider, like I said, we're going to get into the OceanGate lost submersible. British vessel was blocked from joining Titanic sub-rescue mission because U.S. officials wanted to use an inferior U.S.-made vehicle, report says. Here are the cliff notes from the article, and then we'll get into everything. Magellan, a deep-sea surveying company, said it wants to help find the missing submersible, but the company said it is still waiting on permission from officials to get to the site. The U.S. Coast Guard has denied the British assistance was refused in this search for the sub. Now, I do know that help is on the way. That there was a vessel that was sent over from France that has the capability of getting down and all that stuff. The biggest concern right now is being able, depending on where they are, to bring them to the surface, because you can't just snatch them from the bottom and bring them up. Yeah. But like I said, let's get into it. Get comfy. You're going to be sitting for a minute.
It's got one button, and that's it. Yeah, so we run the sub with this game controller. It's made by Logitech, but it's basically a Sony PlayStation style controller. If you want to go forward, you press forward. If you want to go back, you press back. If you want to turn to the left, it's like that. You want to turn to the right, you turn to the right.
Hey guys, if you don't remember yesterday, I said that the French vessel Atalante is bringing the Victor 6000. It is a remote vehicle unmanned, and it could reach up to the depth where the Titanic is and where the submersible might be. Because as of right now, we know that the submersible has not surfaced. That means it's still underwater, either it's stuck or it's just dead in the water. The Victor 6000 takes 2 hours to prepare. Once it arrives, and the operation is likely to take several more hours, but as you know, time is not on their side. There is about 20 hours left of oxygen. But we are all hoping and praying that these noises are being made. More than likely they're alive, and hopes that we are able to even rescue them and bring them to the surface. Even though that is probably the most difficult part about this rescue, is bringing them back to the surface and trying to find something to go to that depth. And the Victor 6000 is able to go to the depth, but is it going to make it in time? That is the question. There will be a press conference at 1 o'clock. I will be going live, and you guys can join in if you want. Other than that, I will keep you guys updated with any new information.
Here's what we know about the passengers trapped on the missing Titanic submersible. 5 passengers were on board the Titan submersible when it lost contact with its research vessel on Sunday. The sub could run out of oxygen in a matter of hours, according to the U.S. Coast Guard, making the rescue mission a race against time. Paul-Henri Nargeolet is a 77-year-old former French Navy diver and Titanic expert nicknamed Mr. Titanic. He was part of the first expedition to visit the Titanic wreck in 1987 and has reportedly spent more time at the wreck than any other explorer. He's the director of underwater research at RMS Titanic, the company that owns the salvage rights to the wreck, and has supervised the recovery of thousands of artifacts. Shahzada Dawood is the vice chairman of Pakistan's Engro Corporation and is from one of Pakistan's wealthiest families. The 48-year-old is also involved with his family business, the Dawood Institute, and is a trustee for the SETI Institute, a California-based research organization that searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. Also on board is Sulman Dawood, Shahzada's 19-year-old son, a student. Shahzada lives with his wife and other child in London. Hamish Harding is a British adventurer and the chairman of Action Aviation, a private jet dealership based in Dubai. The 58-year-old previously traveled to space with Jeff Bezos' company Blue Origin and once visited the South Pole with Buzz Aldrin. He also holds 5 Guinness World Records, including longest time spent at full ocean depth during a dive to the Mariana Trench and fastest circumnavigation of Earth via both the geographic poles by airplane. Before departing on the Titan expedition, Harding wrote on Facebook that due to weather, it was likely to be the first and only manned mission to the Titanic in 2023. Stockton Rush is the CEO and founder of OceanGate. The 61-year-old oversees financial and engineering strategies for the organization. At the age of 19, he became the youngest jet transport-rated pilot in the world.
It's so small. How big is it, and how long were you told you could survive in it?
It's about the size of a minivan, but it's a cylinder, so it holds 5 people. There's no chairs, there's no couches. You are sitting on the floor with your back against the curved sides. As I'm sure you've heard, there's 4 days worth of air. There's 3 different systems. There's as your previous guest referred to, there's a scrubber, the same ones they have in spacecraft, that converts the carbon dioxide you breathe out back into oxygen. If that fails, there are these, they look like fly strips, you hang them from the ceiling, that they're backup scrubbers. And if that fails, they have scuba tanks, oxygen tanks, under the floor of this thing that you can pull out. But there's no food and water apart from the one sandwich and the one water bottle you bring with you. All there is by way of a toilet is basically a big Ziploc bag.
Oh my gosh. All right. At one point when you were on the sub, you lost communication with the mothership on the surface, only for about 2.5 hours, right? And what did you do when you lost communication? Did you just drift around, or what happened?
I should be clear on this. So they never lost contact with the sub. There's a ship on the surface that can send short text messages down to the sub beneath the sea. There's no GPS underwater. There's no radio underwater. So all they can do is send these little text messages. The submersible does not know where it is relative to the Titanic. It might be right over there. It might be right over there. They can't see anything. There's no windows except a tiny round porthole at one end. So up on the ship, the control room looks down and says, it's off to your right by 100 yards. They direct the sub. So what happened for a few hours last summer was during one of these dives, the ship on the surface was giving directions to the submersible on the seafloor that were wrong. Something went wrong with the directional system, and they spent the whole day looking for this Titanic, never found it, and so these passengers who'd paid $250,000 a head had to come back to the surface having seen nothing.
So I got to get your reaction when you hear that they've lost this sub, that they lost control and communication of it after an hour and 45 minutes into the descent, which I think that's about how long it takes to get down there, or no?
That would be about halfway down, 2/3 of the way down.
2/3 of the way down. And then by 9 p.m. Sunday night, at launch Sunday morning, they reported it missing. What do you imagine is happening on board?
This is the only submersible in the world still operating that can go to the Titanic. So it is a one-off. It is a one-of-a-kind. There's not, it's not like an iPhone made by the thousands. There's one of it made by this one man who's had experience building airplanes and submarines, Stockton Rush. He runs the company. And so going in that, it's not going to be Delta Airlines level safety. You sign a waiver. It says, these are all the different ways I could die. I mean, they outline it for you. So there's so many mechanical problems and weather delays. I mean, on my dive to the Titanic, we only got 37 feet down when there was a mechanical problem, and we had to come back up to the surface. And that's typical.
So here's a press conference and the Coast Guard talking about the noises that have been heard. If you don't remember, they are hearing tapping or banging sounds that sound like they're coming from the submersible. And they still say these sounds are still happening today, but that the ocean is a very, very noisy place. But take a listen and let me know you guys' thoughts.
We always have hope. That's why we're doing what we do. With respect to the noises specifically, we don't know what they are. To be frank with you, the P3 detected noises. That's why they're up there. That's why they're doing what they're doing. That's why they put sonar buoys in the water. The good news is, what I can tell you is, we're searching in the area where the noises were detected, and we'll continue to do so. And we hope that when we're able to get additional ROVs, which will be there in the morning, the intent will be to continue to search in those areas where the noises were detected, and if they're continuing to be detected, and then put additional ROVs down in the last known position where the search was originally taking place. I hadn't heard 30-minute intervals. So here's what I can tell you. I am not a trained ear for underwater aquatics. That's why we have a team of experts that are analyzing that data. That data was sent immediately to the Navy last night, and it was analyzed overnight. They're still looking at it, but I can tell you that it's inconclusive. But again, I think the important piece is we're searching in the area where the noises were detected.
The passengers on the Titanic sub are gone, and I don't say that very lightly, but I was an anti-submarine officer. Let me explain some stuff. Around 1 o'clock today, articles said they had about 40 hours of breathable air, so they're down to about 37 now. But even if they find this submarine, which is going to be very difficult to pick up on sonar because of rocks and other objects in the water, they won't be able to actually lift this submarine out of the water or open any of the doors or hatches. When an object is, say, in the middle of the ocean, you have buoyant forces that can push up. But this submarine is at the very bottom, likely on the seabed, at 13,000 feet, which means that 100% of the buoyant forces is in the downward direction. It would literally take an act of God for that submarine to come back up. When I was in the Navy, we had what's known as the WQC-2 Gertrude. It's an underwater microphone you can basically listen. And while I was doing a tour in the Middle East, specifically in the Persian Gulf, there was an Iranian sub that went down to the bottom. And it was one of the saddest things because you wanted to help them, but we were not allowed to. And we could physically hear on the Gertrude the sailors banging on pipes, asking for help. There was nothing that we could do. At the beginning, there was lots of bangs. Bang, 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 bang. And as time progressed, the bangs got slower. Bang, bang. Pretty depressing, to be honest. So I don't really like saying it, but condolences to these individuals and their families. Like I said, it'll take literally an act of God to pull something like that 13,000 feet from under the water. And divers can't really help there. They could cut it open, but the second you do that, you'll have water pouring in it super fast. It would crush them on the inside.
There is still more to go through. I just want to let you know, I do have the news on. There is no breaking news currently regarding this submersible. Current breaking news is the Trump team is being told who will testify in the documents trial, and the DOJ is beginning to forward evidence over to them. And we do know that Trump can only view this evidence and the witness list under the supervision of his attorney in the attorney's office, and he cannot talk about it. We'll see how close he stands to it. But let's finish getting into OceanGate.
So this submarine that they still can't find, do you know the details about this? This man has a company called OceanGate, which already sounds like a scandal. He offers this experience where you take a submarine down to the floor of the ocean so you can see the Titanic. This company has no regulations or standards. You have to sign a waiver saying I'll probably die, but it's fine because I love the Titanic, and it costs $250,000 to do it. So the people in the submarine were billionaires. The submarine is the size of a minivan, so all 5 of them are in this little tube. But what's crazy is that he jerry-rigged it with construction tubes and camping supplies. Well, listen to how it's operated.
We run the whole thing with this game control.
Babe, no wonder 5 years ago, someone who worked there was like, I think people are going to die. And they're like, you're fired. This highly reputable Marine Technology Society was like, please don't do this. So they have about 1 day left of oxygen. And there's 3 things they think could have happened. It could be floating on the surface of the water because they can't open it from the inside. It has to be from the outside. But they've been searching and this isn't likely. Option 2 is that there was a crack in it or something and it just imploded, which honestly is pretty plausible. And the last is that they are stuck in the Titanic. If this is the case, the only way they can be saved is if instruments come down and basically break it apart. But do they even want that? If I love the Titanic so much that I ignored every sign that I was going to die, don't rip the Titanic open for me. I don't want the survivor's guilt. I came down here with an Xbox controller. I knew what I was doing.
Real quick, because a lot of people keep saying, oh, don't destroy the Titanic. Y'all do realize that there is a metal-eating bacteria that's already devouring the Titanic. It's projected to no longer exist by the year 2030. Y'all don't respect the tombs, the grave sites of anybody else. Pish posh. Let's continue.
The crew closes the hatch from the outside with
Hull integrity, holding.
And what happened next? You won't be disappointed, as we'll show you a little later on Sunday morning. Our dive in the OceanGate submersible had made it down only 37 feet when this happened.
So apparently those floats there came off the platform. That wasn't supposed to happen, so we're scrubbing?
Yeah, I think that's the consensus up here.
Copy that.
I was crushed. My diving adventures were over.
Every expedition has its challenges, all of them. I have not been in one expedition where things have to be adjusted, adapted, changed, or canceled at the end of the day. You're at the mercy of the weather.
Renata Rojas speaks from painful experience. Over the years, she's been booked on 3 Titanic expeditions. All 3 were canceled.
You just cry a lot. And just keep the dream alive, because it's something that I have to do.
Our expedition had to wait out 2 more days of rough seas. On our 6th day at sea, the weather cleared. The dive was a go.
Titan, sitting at 3742 meters, reports on bottom.
But that was the last of the good news.
I said, do you know where we are? 100 meters to the bow, then 470 to the bow. If you are lost, so are we.
There's no GPS underwater, so the surface ship is supposed to guide the sub to the shipwreck by sending text messages.
Turn 30 degrees right?
Probably 30 degrees.
But on this dive, communications somehow broke down. The sub never found the wreck.
We were lost. We were lost for 2.5 hours.
Rush says he'll offer those passengers a free do-over next year. And that's just one cost of doing this business.
Are you making money on this operation?
No. So, not yet. People might say, hey, that's a lot of money, $250,000. But we went through over $1 million of gas.
It was our last day at sea. There was one last chance to reach the Titanic.
Submarine used to take tourists to see the...
I'm cutting the intro early because I have a ton of information that I think you're going to find super interesting. So before anything, I really want to just show you this chart so you can get an understanding of what's happening on a scale. This is a chart showing the vessels and equipment being deployed in the search. You have the 2 C-130s with 2 other Canadian aircrafts that are supplying air support, which launches sonar devices so that we can try to track where the Titan is at. And then once we get down into about 2,000, 3,000 feet range, the Curve 21 has a maximum depth of like 2,000 feet, and it can't lift the total weight of the Titan submersible. Now, this is new information for me, but the Victor 6000 can reach a depth of about 9,000 feet. But unfortunately, it won't be able to make it there until Wednesday evening at the earliest. But that isn't even the part that's the most interesting out of this whole situation. A headline from the New York Times reads, "Some experts fear an innovative submersible maker was quote-unquote cutting corners." So if you didn't know, there's been a history of submersibles that actually go down to the depths of Titanic and has made it back no problems whatsoever, mostly because they're built like behemoths and they actually have a track record that shows that they're relatively safe. But here's an excerpt from the New York Times. "But Titan, the lost submersible from the company OceanGate, is a technological maverick based on the novel concepts that differ from standard design. Moreover, unlike most deep-sea craft, Titan has undergone no certification by a reputable marine group that does such licensing work for other craft, including one built by OceanGate that dives to shallower depths." New York Times even went as far as to interview a submariner, Alfred S. McLaren, and what he had to say on the whole entire thing is, "I've had 3 people ask me about making a dive on it. And I said, don't do it. I wouldn't do it in a million years." It also goes to talk about the fact that the hull of the Titan is actually made of 2 completely different materials. Apparently the hull of the Titan, as opposed to the previous versions that they've had in the past, are made of carbon fiber and titanium, which is intended to make a significantly lighter craft as opposed to using only steel or only titanium. Dr. McLaren goes on to say that this raises a bunch of structural concerns. He says that they have different coefficients of expansion and compression, and that works against keeping a watertight bond. Taking that into account, there is a solid chance there might have been a mechanical error with the Titan as they were descending. As of right now, I personally haven't found any news on if they found the location of the Titan or not, but in part 10, maybe I will. We're gonna hit part 10, guys. That's crazy.
Just wanted to hop back on and answer some of the most common questions so far. The first one is, why weren't they tethered to the ship? I'm not sure why they made a lot of the choices that they did with this submersible, but it is possible to have a tethered manned submersible. For example, these are the Pisces 4 and 5, which are manned underwater vehicles that can go down to 6,500 feet while still attached with a tether. Some people were thinking that the currents wouldn't really allow you to have a tether. It is true that the current velocities at each layer of the ocean can be going in different directions, but as long as you have enough negative buoyancy to keep sinking, this doesn't necessarily have to be a huge issue, because there's not really anything out in the open ocean that you could get caught up on as the tether sways back and forth as you go down. The main risk with a tether is that if the surface conditions are rough and the boat starts to bang around on the surface, you could end up snapping the tether from the boat to the rest of the stuff that's underwater. This is a picture of an instrument that we send down thousands of meters on a very thick wire cable. On this cruise, we actually did have to do an emergency retrieval of the device while it was thousands of meters down because it did start to get too rough on the surface. They may have been worried about this, especially going to 13,000 feet, because that's much farther, again, than most manned vehicles would go. But honestly, I really doubt that that was their concern, because when I looked at their website, they talked about how the design of the submersible made it so that they could deploy off of smaller, cheaper boats that didn't have an A-frame. To do a deployment like this off of a boat that doesn't have an A-frame is honestly crazy. Here's a picture from field work that I did last summer up in Washington. You can see that the size of all of our robots is much smaller than a submersible, and we still needed to use an A-frame to deploy these for safety. The next question is, why could shooting to the surface be an issue? I mentioned how I was kind of concerned about the drop weight mechanism if the sub were to ascend rapidly from 13,000 feet. Theoretically speaking, this submersible should have been held at a constant pressure of 1 atmosphere, which is the same as the pressure that you would experience at sea level. I didn't mean to insinuate that how a sub's pressure system and an airplane's pressure system operates is exactly the same. I just use an airplane as an example because it's much more familiar to more people. In an airplane, there's some inflow and outflow that is controlled to keep the plane at approximately constant pressure. Whereas in a sub, you should set that pressure at the surface and it should maintain the same pressure for the entire dive. However, in some subs, the gas canisters that are used to control the buoyancy of the sub, aka how deep in the water column it's hovering, does use pressurized gas canisters which change pressure. What I meant is that given the engineering failings of this vehicle and the fact that I actually cannot find any information on the buoyancy controls online, or any kind of manual for the Titan at all, which is a red flag, I don't really feel super confident that their ability to maintain that 1 atmosphere of pressure and the fact that the canisters could be decompressing, etc., means that they would stay at that constant pressure as they ascend quickly. If they were to shoot to the surface and the pressure wasn't maintained in the way that it should have been, then it is possible that they could get the bends, which is where nitrogen gas accumulates in your bloodstream due to these rapid pressure changes. However, honestly, I don't think this is super relevant because I think it was probably an engineering issue at depth. I'm also seeing reports that the way that the drop weight was supposed to be triggered, which would send them back to the surface, is instead of there being some kind of automatic safety mechanism built in, the people that were on board would basically have to all shift their weight to one side of the vehicle so that the drop weight could come off. Again, insane. Next is, if the sub was crushed at depth, do we think that we would find any of the pieces? Probably not. It's a relatively small vehicle and it probably broke apart if it was crushed. The only way any of the pieces would reach the surface is if they were in their own individual constituent parts, positively buoyant enough that they could rise through all the different layers of the water. It's much more likely that these individual pieces just sank. And lastly, if GPS doesn't function at depth, then how do we get these shark GPS data? These sharks have battery-powered instruments that are attached to their fins. These instruments log the information of where they're traveling, how deep they're going, what the temperature of the water is, etc. This data is stored locally on the device and only transmits back to the scientists via satellite when the shark comes to the surface.
So let's recap and add to some of the revelations about OceanGate and its CEO I brought you yesterday, including new audio just surfaced where the CEO, Stockton Rush, says he doesn't hire experienced white guys like his competition because he says they aren't inspirational and that he prefers 20-somethings he can train instead of experience. I'll go through the full quote shortly. I also spent most of yesterday going through court docs I received about how Rush and OceanGate were sued after he would not return early committed passengers' money even after canceling their trips due to weather and safety issues. He was accused of saying he would give a refund, but convinced them they should go instead on the expedition. But when they ultimately decided they didn't trust his operation, he said he would not return the money. The ticket holders then had to involve the court system to get resolution. An even more concerning case involved a previous company director who said OceanGate skirted regulators who would have demanded different materials and safety protocols be put in place, and was apparently fired when he brought the concerns up. Now, back to the audio. Here's more of what the CEO said. Quote, "When I started the business, one thing you'll find is that there are other sub-operators out there, but they typically have gentlemen who are ex-military submariners. And you'll see a whole bunch of 50-year-old white guys. I wanted our team to be younger, to be inspirational. I'm not going to inspire a 16-year-old to go and pursue marine technology, but a 25-year-old who is a sub-pilot or a platform operator or whatever can be inspirational. So we've really tried to get very intelligent, younger individuals involved because we're doing things that are completely new. We're taking approaches that are largely used in the aerospace industry as related to safety and some of the preponderance of checklists, things we do for risk assessments, and things like that are more aviation related than ocean related. And we can train people to do that. We can train someone to pilot a sub. We can use a game controller so anyone can drive the sub. And remember, we're only days into this thing, and already I have stacks this big and quotes like that, so you can expect a lot more to be coming out in the coming days."
Now, one woman is crying because she can't get down to the Titanic. You all do realize that there was an unmanned submersible that went down and took photos from every angle where you can have a virtual experience of the Titanic. The of the wreckage. You can see whatever you want to see. She's crying. This is rich people problems. She's crying about that, and there are people who are crying because they don't have anything to eat tonight and didn't have anything the night before and the night before that. There are people who are crying because they have no idea how they're going to get to work tomorrow. And after all this time, capitalism and the top 1% has told us we need so much experience in order to get a job, but he is treating his employees like conservatives treat getting a wife. He wants someone with a clean slate that he can convince, nope, we don't need regulations. Nope, we don't need to do this way. Nope, you don't worry about engineering. Don't worry about safety. Just worry about, doing what you do at home in your mama's basement. Just take this controller that is the cheapest that you can buy and work with it. Told y'all, old money will scrimp on the things that they should put money into. They will cut corners in places that they should not because it's greed. Because all they're concerned about is collecting more money. And he's sitting here talking about, no, he's not making a profit. Who are you paying? Because you're firing everybody. You're cutting corners everywhere. $250,000 a head, and y'all keep going down? And then even people who don't even get an opportunity to get in the submersible, you're not even giving them their money back. Once again, stop thinking wealth equates to intelligence. And please stop idolizing the wealthy and thinking that they give a damn about you. If they did, Governor Abbott in Texas wouldn't be able to take away water breaks from construction workers right now. Whoo, child. But as always, thank you for joining me here for Conversations with Taz for Wild Wednesday. Make sure you check out the links in the description of this video. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be updated, not just to when podcasts are on the air, but also any news updates, etc., that I do post on this channel as well. And if you enjoyed tonight's episode, make sure you share it with a friend. And when you come back, bring a friend with you. Let's end it with the former besties fighting over who can try to impeach Biden on the House floor. Till tomorrow, as always, each one teach one, each one reach one.
So we have an update to the story about Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert having a heated argument on the House floor today in which Marjorie Taylor Greene allegedly called her a little bee. And the update is Marjorie Taylor Greene confirmed the story is true and that she did saying that, calling it impressively correct. And this is the exact quote. Greene said, "I've donated to you, I've defended you, but you've been nothing but a little bee to me. And you copied my articles of impeachment after I asked you to co-sponsor them." Yeah, so while Democrats are working for the American people, Republicans are having petty feuds on the House floor.